All right, well, I will officially call, well, Janet, are you there? Because I just want to make sure that you'll be taking minutes.
Who are you asking?
Janet.
Now I'm here.
Welcome. All right, I'm going to officially call the meeting to order and thank everybody for having this out of order meeting. But I think as we mentioned at our last meeting, we do have a lot of work to do. So I think this will be a good meeting to discuss the agenda item that we have coming up about a process. But first, we had said at our last meeting that we would invite public comment at the beginning of each meeting. So I see a couple people signing on.
Right.
So Tom, I think you said there's sort of a town policy about public comment. Do you want to, that you had mentioned in your email?
Generally, and it's not necessarily just Wenham, but in most communities, when they have public comment, the board or the committee take a comments for a matter of a couple minutes or 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Generally do not take action at that meeting. They will probably, if it's something that they need to take action on or discuss further, they will take it and place it on an agenda for a future meeting.
Okay. So I think I will open it up to public comment at this time. If somebody wants to make a comment, they can raise their hand and I'll recognize them. Okay, seeing no public comment, I'm going to move on. So what we wanted to discuss tonight is sort of a process for handling information that we might receive in a public comment or through our email, which we have received emails, and eventually we'll set up a phone line. So I did a little research. I don't know what else other people might have done in preparation for this meeting, but other towns' human rights commissions do have some elaborate and some less elaborate ways of doing it. So I share my screen and show you some of the things that I thought we could have a general discussion about it. Since we only have this one item, we can deliberate since we're not allowed to deliberate outside of the meeting. I also thought it might make sense to try to set up some subcommittees of up to 3 people to do some legwork that they could bring back to the meetings in terms of looking at ways, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at what other committees have done, but we do have some areas that we kind of need to focus on, this being one of them. Another is just events that are coming up that we want to participate in, things like that. So how does that sound to everybody?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. So Tom, if you want to make me the host, I'll share my screen.
Okay, just 1 minute.
So one of the places that I looked at was
All set.
okay. Just want to see where I'm going here. So the town of Lexington has a very well-established human rights committee, and they have a couple of things I thought were interesting that we might want to consider for ourselves. One of them is this flow chart that they put together, and it sort of goes through what happens when a complaint is received. I don't know if can you see this?
Yeah.
Partially. Can you zoom out a teeny bit? Is that possible?
That's what I was thinking.
The minus button ought to.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for that tip. So anyway, they have a flow chart, and a lot of the different groups do this, depending on the size of the town and the complexity of the issues they might face. They look at, and we might even start with a complaint form that they would fill out. So you can either email this information or they have the form on the website. And in addition to just the person's name, there's sort of categories of where, in what way do you think you were discriminated against? And some of these may or may not apply to us in Wenham, credit lending, public accommodation, but they could, anything would be possible. So I liked this because it kind of gave us an avenue to direct the complaint. right? Depending on what it is, we'd sort of be able to put it in an avenue of where, who in town might be the person or group that would address it. So this kind of goes through different ways that people felt their rights were violated, and then they submit it. And then the flow chart kind of, a complaint is received. Is it a civil rights issue? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a complaint related to something else. And then, document the complaint, refer to other agency for support. And then if it's yes, is this a dispute with an individual? You guys can read this. I'm not going to read it out loud, but I don't know this was just kind of a first glance at something to give us an opportunity to talk about how we feel about what we want to do with information that's going to come in.
Martha, I had printed this out and I think it's a great model to investigate myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I had wondered whether they had made any of protecting privacy and anonymity, and whether we could get some guidelines on that as well, because that also seems like something that's pretty important, particularly if we want people to feel like they can come forward to us in a manner where they feel safe and like they can trust the process.
I wonder if that's even an issue for town council, Tom. I mean, if people are emailing that HRC email address, is that automatically public information? Or can it be considered confidential? Like, I do think we need to establish that, because people are not gonna necessarily want to come forward if they know that everybody in town can know about it right away.
Now we can I can do some follow-up on that. What also might be interesting is, and I have a lot of respect for Lexington and their individuals who work in their town government there, is also how has this been over the past few years? I mean, how has it operated? Yeah, and finding out how it's been implemented and worked, because I'm sure they must have received at least some caseload through there. And how did it develop and how did it finish?
Right. So privacy, as we were mentioning, as Sam was mentioning, is definitely one of the things that I was thinking we need to follow up on. So I wonder if, Pat, you would be willing to try to follow up with someone from the Human Rights Commission in Lexington to try.
I've already
Okay.
done that. I haven't
right.
heard back, but I have emailed. I have an email out. I just haven't heard, but maybe I'll try calling town hall and finding out if there's a more direct route. But yes, I will.
Okay. So the other thing that they had was these guidelines for civil discourse.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we don't have to take everything. I thought that this was nice in terms of if people are going to be speaking in public, and maybe they have this because they had a lot of uncivil discourse at their public meetings. But again, I think it's maybe obvious to some, but in the rhetoric that we've had in the past few years, it serves as a good reminder.
I also think that this may be something that, again, in thinking about how this committee can be a safe place for people to come to, these are things that we certainly could consider committing to ourselves, right? That this is how we will conduct ourselves. We can't necessarily control how everyone else does, but that, having as much of a transparent process as possible for people to look into and say, okay, if I bring my complaint, what can I expect? I think is going to really help people in building some confidence in us as a place where they can come.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also wonder, Kevin specifically, what do we do if we get complaints that might need to be referred to the police, or how do
we get complaints?
Well, there's both sides of that: complaints about the police, but also complaints that should be referred to the police.
I was thinking more the latter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but both things could happen. So I think we need to have some ideas about how we handle that information.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, obviously, and it was touched upon a little bit already, is the confidentiality of it, and the once a person, whether it's wherever they are coming from for our perspective, if they have to hesitate coming forward, then we haven't done our job, I think, effectively. Because if there's any barrier there that takes away the comfort and safety and security of coming forward, then we're missing something. And the same thing rings true. I say it to the folks that work with me and for me now, that if you got to hesitate before coming into my office, then it's on me. I'm not doing my job effectively. And once that barrier is created, we've all had bosses over the years that I'm not going to him because I don't want the retribution or the pushback or the blowback. And I'm not comfortable doing that. And once that happens, I think it's on the boss, it's not on the subordinate. And it's hard to undo that and create that safe environment. Once one person feels that way, then that can have a snowball effect. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Well said.
Yeah. Well,
Right, Kevin, do you guys have a complaint process at the police station? Like, is there something already in place if somebody wanted to make a complaint? I'm just wondering.
We do, yeah. We have a specific policy in place, and it's happened, and it's been, over the years, they're fully investigated accordingly. They're, the strict confidentiality of the process is put in place, and we handle it almost like a, just on my training and experience in doing it, it's treated like a full investigation relative to interviewing any possible witnesses. Who was there when the allegation, when the incident allegedly occurred? Was there anyone else? Is it just a he said, she said? Were there other people in the room when the incident occurred? And we interview them separately. We get statements accordingly, and we soup to nuts handle it as such. And then we take appropriate measures relative to training, policy change, discipline, God forbid, if in a worse scenario, that depending on the severity of it, how we handle it.
Kevin, I guess I'm more concerned about individuals, particularly women, who may come, only because I've had this happen to me, who may come to someone who's in a position in town that they're turning to for advice. And if it is a situation where there's either a child who's in danger or a woman who's in danger, I think that could be more likely the kind of concern we might have. And I think we need a broad policy on that and some direction and support, because I really think that no woman is going to want to go to, with all due respect to selectmen and town administrators, they are not want to go and voice that complaint or concern. But I do think they would turn to the police if they are assured from, for instance, this committee, that it's a safe, caring place to go, and that that they can trust the process. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, this has happened, and I won't go into details, obviously, but I know I just was not satisfied with how it all worked out. And not that anyone was at fault in town, but it was just, I didn't know how far to push it because, children's safety, a woman's safety. So I would really, maybe this is a whole different discussion when you present to us or do a workshop with us or whatever, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
I kind of think of our committee as being somewhere in between, like an HR department, which would have policies, and like a police investigation, which would have more formal and rigid.
Right.
Whereas our committee is kind of an in-between thing, because some things that will come to us will be very HR-like, and some things may come, as Pat said, which will be obviously need to be referred to the police. But I think we need sort of these robust guidelines to handle those in-between things where people might say, I don't know if I want to come forward. Maybe I'm taking it the wrong way. And we want to let them know
Yeah.
that-
Well,
Well,
I don't, the other thing, and then I'll keep quiet. I think part of the problem in town is that we don't have any HR consulting or anyone that we could refer to. I don't think I think the town handbook personally could, I think we could have someone come into town just to help with the town handbook, the rollout of it, and then training for committees like us. I don't think maybe the town can afford a whole HR person, but it is important in this day and age to have professional HR input, my opinion.
This may be off subject, but one of my plans before I leave here is how we can, with the new town administrator, is how you can bring forth HR to Wenham. I've done that in the past, and how you can do a part-time basis and have it be successful.
Yeah, I think that is very important, Tom, and I'd love to see that happen personally.
The one thing I was also thinking during this discussion is, and I would leave it up to the committee if they would be interested, is at a future meeting, maybe even your next meeting, would you want to have, because you've had a lot of questions regarding legal aspects of this, is whether you would want town council or one of the specialists on a Zoom meeting for you to have questions for about a half hour, 35 minutes, because one question leads to another one. So just something, if you'd be interested in me for setting it up for one of your future meetings.
Honestly, and then I really will shut up. I think it would be even more beneficial to have an HR person come, because they really do understand the laws and the procedures that deal with, not just town government, but, communities at large. And then, because I
I
don't
can
think
get you both.
always know. I don't think you lawyers always know.
Well, Pat,
There's more than just the town part of it, though. I think the HR
That's right.
piece is part of it, but I actually think starting with the lawyer in terms of knowing, especially about guaranteeing confidentiality with
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where
regards to especially stuff that comes into that Wenham email address, as I just, could envision, getting requested that we have to turn those emails over or something if there was litigation. And so I think we need to make sure we understand the ramifications of that so that we can communicate to the citizens we're going to have to go on a big PR kind of
Mhm.
binge.
Yeah,
People know that
that's
we're
true.
here and what we do and what we represent and what kinds of information. I don't want to call them all complaints because it's sort of pejorative, but just, what kinds of outreach will people have to us, and what can we do with that outreach? Not just be a clearinghouse or marking it down, but what actions can we take? Which is why I liked the flow chart.
And how can we silo that information in order to keep people safe while also having a transparent process? And can we, for example, if we consider our position as sort of an intermediary between the town infrastructure and people within the town, right? Then is our job basically sort of advocacy, advice, and in that role, do we then need the ability, for example, when something comes into us, to spin off a small 2-person working group, for example, to privately move forward with, advising and advocating, and then coming back to report to the committee, right? Because again, there's a real balancing act here between the clear need for public transparency in the work that we do as a committee and the clear need to protect people who have the courage to come forward to this body and ask for our help, right? And we're more or less powerless in terms of making any actual change, right? We can make recommendations. One of the places where we may have a great deal of power is in this, this notion behind, we can be a conduit to consult with legal. We can be a conduit to connect with PD. We can be a conduit for HR connection, and that being able to task a couple of us to confidentially work with somebody might be a great way to give people a real understanding of like, oh, if I outreach, this is what I get.
Right, that's a good point. And I had an example that happened not in our town, but in another town that could come to us under that auspices of that complaint form. And this was somebody who had been dealing with a realtor and set up to look at some houses. And when they met to look at the houses and the realtor realized that the person was Black, they canceled the appointments. And this happened just a couple years ago. In a neighboring town. And so I know it's one of those things you think that's not going to happen here, but those kinds of subtle things can happen just below the surface. And, excuses can be made. Oh, sorry, it fell through. The house was already under agreement. But we would want those people that happened to come to us. Now, it's not a town function, right? But if it happened in our town with a local realtor, we would want to know. And then we would want to have a process where we refer them to, the realtor's board or whatever. It's just, I'm just using this as an example of the type of thing that would fall under our auspices. I believe it's a discrimination complaint, but it's not strictly speaking an HR kind of thing. And it's not a police matter, right? So like, how do those things kind of funnel through?
Right. So we need the opportunity to be a little bit quick on our feet when we're presented with things that we haven't planned for. Right. Like, you can also think of like connecting women and families with Hawk in Salem if they need, shelter or a place to, like there's an endless list of things that we can probably be responsible for. And what we need to think through is how do we create a transparent process that allows us, I think, the flexibility to then advocate and do research on behalf of somebody who stays anonymous and stays safe and protected. And then ultimately to make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, right? If something warrants a more systematic effort or intervention.
Right. And that was on the flow chart too about, is this a systemic issue versus a specific? We could also then turn things around with the website by putting some of those resources like Hawk or, the police complaint line or the realtor complaint line, or, they were talking about public accommodation. Where does that go if you didn't get served at, if you felt you were discriminated against at a local restaurant, where does that complaint go?
Yeah, do we want to address, for example, Gordon College limits its employees to people who are willing to sign a pledge saying that homosexuality is a disordered lifestyle? Like, that's one of the biggest employers in our town, and they do something that our committee has sort of a different attitude towards than they do.
Yeah, I don't even think we need to say sort of a different attitude, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being judicious if I speak, like, I'm not sure our purpose is to go to war with Gordon College, but we should be cognizant of the fact that if you want to get a job there, you have to sign that pledge.
Right.
We're in fact empowered to quote unquote go to war, right? Where I think we're empowered to advise.
Yeah.
And so, but
I think
that should be in our province for sure.
Absolutely.
Like something to do there.
I know that the high school stopped having their graduations there. Year that the president of Gordon signed the letter asking for permission from the government to discriminate.
Yeah.
But I think there are still connections with Gordon. I know that they still use the swimming pool for the swim team. So I think we all might want to go ahead. Sorry.
Where's and I'm not sure about this. I agree with what everybody's saying, but where do we stand considering that it is a private institution and people who make the decision to, try to get a job there, that's their choice. I don't know really if there's much we can do about it. Hey, you've made the decision. We can't change Gordon's policy. It's not a public institution. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I think that we could be a place though where maybe students or employees of Gordon who felt they were being discriminated against could air their grievances. I know
Oh,
that.
sure, yeah, yeah.
I
but
know
don't-
that there's been some outreach with some students of color there to the local NAACP and the human rights group because of some incidents on campus, some racist incidents on campus. And I think in that case, we could weigh in with our strong opinions about what they should be doing about it or offer them resources.
And also,
Well,
I'm
and it,
good.
Go ahead, Tova.
well, just additionally, so if, for example, our school is using the facility and assumingly paying for it, like, I don't know, that could be something if we have like public money going towards something that's paying Gordon College, that kind of does bring it into our jurisdiction potentially.
Right. I think one of the ways that this gets a little messy is that it doesn't pay taxes, and so they offer
Yeah,
to the town in
right.
of taxes.
They
And
don't-
Right.
inflation up there was one of those things, and I think this was one of those things. So
Okay.
Can I suggest that this is one of our bigger fish to fry?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that we should get to this.
Yeah.
But that right now, given that we have a live email address that people can write into, I do think the most pressing concern I have is let's be ready for that email that comes into us that we need to take action on.
Good point. Good point.
Well, and I'm not clear. We're talking about a lot of different scenarios, but I was hoping tonight that we would be able to establish a broad policy who, what is the chain of command, so to speak? If there's a complaint, I just don't think any of us really know what to do with it.
exactly, yeah, that's why we wanted
So
to.
so I think we really need to focus on what that would be.
It's a really good point, Pat.
Can I ask a
That's where I
point
go back to a broad policy and then with direction and so on. Because otherwise we can all come up with stories, I guess, that might happen.
Martha, does the Lexington flow chart and the policy highlight what type of issues should be forwarded to them?
I have,
You can, and I can email these documents to the committee at the end. Tom, I wasn't sure if I could do that before the meeting or if it had to be in the packet.
Okay, but we have the, we have the information.
Yeah,
and they do. Only because I've downloaded all this stuff. It's one of my, with all the communities I've looked at, I know it's a much larger community, but they really have a great process, I
right.
think.
They do. And if you look at the one that's on the screen now, it gets to Sam's point. The complaint is investigated by a 2-member assigned by chair incident response team, which should not include the chair. If needed, an additional person, someone not on the committee, such as a leader, religious leader, et cetera, et cetera. They interview, witnesses are interviewed. When appropriate, parties are brought together by the incident response team to discuss and resolve amicably.
I don't know if we're necessarily empowered to do that by our
No,
charter,
we're not. Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
That's a good point. So I also brought this. We were talking about 3 and 10 as being the things we were going to talk about tonight. So, these are pretty broad. Any issues, challenges, and individual or group's enjoyment of their basic human rights in town. And 10 being,
Number 10 is a key though.
Well, I think number 9 is pretty important too, because it says there that we serve as a portal for residents. So maybe that is what our
Right.
policy should be,
Right. But you were
right.
not, you were not supposed to investigate though.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
it does actually say that. We don't have the
Yeah.
authority to formally investigate.
or to mediate, right, a resolution. So
And
our
frankly,
charter is
I wouldn't want to have to
different
do
from the
either one.
Lexington charter, but
Right.
that does not mean that we can't advocate and advise, right? And I think
Right.
that's a great place for us to focus right now. is-
Advocate, advise, and sort of pass off to the appropriate.
Right, and facilitate. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, because I
Because-
certainly want to investigate or any of that stuff.
Go ahead, Tova. You wanted to say?
Yeah, so I guess if the clemency issue hadn't been seemingly resolved before this meeting had taken place, did anybody have like a strong feeling of what we were going to work toward? Like, would it have been a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen? Would it have been like a public statement of something? Like what, because that, I don't know, thinking through that might give us an idea of how we would deal with the next thing.
I guess from my perspective, I imagine what if that initial concern had been raised to us through our email address?
Right.
How would we have
Exactly.
approached it? And what would have been our mandate in that regard?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
I think a good start with the reporting party is what do they want? Because the goals of reporting it might be 5 different reports and 5 different goals by the reporter. Some might, a lot of times folks will come to the police department and say, I don't want anything done. I just want it on file. I just want it reported. Or, I'm deeply troubled. This has affected my life incredibly greatly. I want the person who did X, Y, or Z to be held accountable to the fullest extent possible. It can vary. It can go, from 0 to 100. And I think that's important to really ascertain what the person, in a perfect world, what do you want done?
I think that's a great point. And I also think that this is a question, if we wanted to use the clemency complaint as an example of where we would need to have some legal advice. I mean, I envisioned more of a statement of support kind of a thing, but in following what happened, the Board of Selectmen didn't have any power to do anything. They couldn't force the resignation. So
No.
there's that aspect of it. Like, we can make a statement, but and not that it's not important, but I think that's a great point. Like, what is it that the person wants?
Mhm.
Well, and one of the things I liked about the Lexington form you showed us was that actually was an explicit question asked in the form.
Let me go back to the form.
Yeah, right, Sam, you're
Oh,
right.
there you go.
How
Oh,
do you
yeah.
want to tell what remedy?
That's another good thing. It's right here. Is anybody else looking into it? Yeah. What are you seeking, and who else? So in the case that we're referencing, like, the person might say, well, I have taken it to MCAT. I have taken it to the HR at town hall, if that is a thing. Sounds like it's not, or like could be something in the school system. So.
And we should spell out, here's what the Human Rights Committee can do for you, right?
Exactly. That's
Two
right.
members can be assigned to your concern, and they can advise you. They can work to connect you, with the appropriate, agencies and help. And they can advocate for you if there's a need for a systemic change that needs to go before the Board of Selectmen, for example. And those are the types of support that we, are able to offer under our mandate. And that makes a nice, transparent sort of, sense of here's what I get when I go to the Human Rights
Yeah.
Committee.
I think that's brilliant. Sign it up and we're done.
I have another example that's a little easier of the type of thing, because this is something that I'm going to put on the agenda for next time because it's come forward, is that there's an effort to have the Board of Selectmen recognize that Wenham was built on Indigenous land. It's sort of a movement to recognize this as being put together by a student at the high school. And they started by going to the Human Rights Coalition, and now they're putting something together through the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. Now, they come to us, that I was emailed about this. I think in that case, we could discuss it as a committee, and maybe offer a statement of support, recommending that the Board of Selectmen, go forward with the statement. So this is just like an example, but I think we're going to get those types of things too. And other proclamations, like, would we want to have a proclamation about Black History Month or Juneteenth or Pride Month? Like, there'll be things that are kind of events or regular things. And so there's the sort of supportive proclamations, but then there's also programming. Do we want to offer programming or a reading list? A lot of the Human Rights Commission websites for towns in Mass often had a reading list or which I think are great. And I think we do want to offer those things, but this is why I was thinking that we could have some subgroups. Couple people who are interested could work on the reading list. A couple people who are interested could think about what events we might get involved with. A couple people could work on this sort of response to inbound.
Let's not necessarily duplicate efforts that are being taken on by the, to be fair, much larger human rights coalition, who is targeting, working on some events and doing so. I think
Yeah, not
working
duplicate,
with
but
them
support.
yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So working in tandem is really important. But
Right, and I think, Jeremy, you're our liaison, correct? Or you're the liaison to the Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm the liaison to Hamilton. They're still picking
Right.
representatives in Hamilton.
Yeah,
my wife is the secretary for the coalition, so
Right.
I can't help but be aware of what they're doing.
yeah, absolutely. And I know that, NAACP does programming too, and we don't want to duplicate, but I feel like the point of having this committee at the municipal level was to give it the sort of heft that the town is behind it and not a group of people in the town, but the actual whole town sees all of us and all of our differences.
And I think that brings us to another important area for us to consider, which is sort of what is our relationship with the Board of Selectmen and how do we best, sort of work together to move forward with, important human rights related change and recognition, right? So that's another, we don't have any power, we have the power to recommend, right? And so how best do we use that power with regard to the Board of Selectmen in terms of frankly, picking the fights, right? Like where we want to start, right? That's also, I think, part of what's on the plate for us as we get moving.
Maybe Mr. Cheeseman could weigh in on this. I was wondering about, even as an example, I know that some people have talked about why do we still call them selectmen? Select board in
That's
some
one of the
towns.
things I'm going to try to change here.
Okay.
But that requires a
Since
town
the
meeting vote.
80s, some places have called it select board. But I guess my question to either Tom or Gary is that something that has to be changed by a vote? And is it a vote of the Board of Selectmen? Is it a town meeting vote? Like how does the
Select board?
changed?
Select board's a town meeting vote.
Yes,
You have to change your bylaws to reflect it.
so that would
And
be
how would you bring that to the table, like to be voted on?
it'd be a normal warrant, just like any other item that comes to town meeting, that had to be a warrant created to change the wording, just as if you would change in zoning bylaw, same thing in structural. What we're talking about is a name change would be done at the town meeting. And that's,
And
go ahead.
sorry, thank you. Does a warrant come from a citizen, or is that something that this committee could propose?
Well, the warrants can originate, typically a lot of them come from town hall with the usual budget warrants. Then any individual can, with a group, Tom, you'll have to back me up on this. How many
Okay.
do we need to have a citizen warrant?
There's various ways of doing the select board can propose the article. If you have petitioned article with the proper amount of signatures, would guarantee it be placed on the warrant. A department or a committee could propose an article, and if the select board, the Board of Selectmen, you're not select board yet. If I keep calling them that, I apologize maybe, but they can put it on an article. I mean, they have a great deal of latitude in placing that.
Okay, thank you.
And I will just say that that item's already been circulating in town hall and at least one member of the Board of Selectmen, if I'll say that.
Well, will there be issues getting warrants on this year's town meeting because of the fact that only you are on the select board now?
So I give you a quick upbrief on, I anticipate a special election coming up. So I hope to have a quorum back before going into town meeting. So given the dates, I should hope that we would able to get a lot of things done with at least the quorum of 2 before we close the articles for a town meeting. So working towards that direction to get that in.
The other way,
We're talking April town meeting.
May 1st,
Okay.
May
3rd.
1st. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
the other way is a petitioned article with signatures that would guarantee it. But if it's something that Chairperson Cheeseman, supports right now, we have one board member and myself. I would be we would probably be fine working with the petitioners to make sure they had the correct language.
And I'd love, Chairperson Cheeseman, to hear a little bit about sort of your hopes of what our committee might offer to the Board of Selectmen, soon to be Select Board,
Right.
in terms of that, delivering on that advice and recommendations piece.
So Martha, if you invite me to do that.
Yes, please. I would.
So I think from what I've seen and hearing tonight, that the roles that you probably need to pick up first is a response to an individual complaint. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to be the clearinghouse to tie that person to the right expertise or the right source, police department or whatever? That, as you saw in the charge, that I would see that the committee is also an advocate for programs either from the coalition or from other bodies in the town or in the North Shore, including an aspect of education of the public as well. And then third, the advocacy for particular positions would be in the charge. We say you need to report periodically to the Board of Selectmen. So if there's a broader policy kind of advocacy that you want to put forward, then I see that coming in written form from the committee as a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to consider. Does that help at all?
I think so, significantly, for me at least.
Yeah, because I think the initial thing you're going to get is, I think a lot of people see you as a communications line. So I think you need to get that structure in place. So tomorrow morning, someone comes to you and say, hey, I sent you email, I got this problem. I think you need that up and running pretty quick.
Well, and frankly, thanks, Tom, for that. And I agree. And I really think that's something we need to accomplish before tonight's over.
So do we want to have 2 people assigned to handling that intake of complaints and messages? Is that what we were kind of going for?
Well, I think the Lexington structure is pretty clear, right? That the chairperson identifies members, 2 members who work that particular concern, and that we can sort of trust the chairperson to try to select people with the right expertise to help in different cases, for example.
Right, if it was, depending on the type of information that comes in. Right, so if it was something that was clearly going to need the police, maybe we get Kevin involved. If it's school related, there could be different aspects to it. But and I think, Tova, that it would change with each one. It wouldn't be like,
That makes sense.
it would be ad hoc. So we get an email, I call 2 people, can you guys take this and investigate and get back? So, but what I think maybe somebody could volunteer to take the flow chart and put our sort of Wenham language on it. And then we could sort of finalize that at the February 1st meeting. But that's why I was thinking of like a working group to kind of take it. I don't know, Pat, you said that you had downloaded a lot. I'm not looking, you're not looking up, so you're not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hear you, no.
I'm listening.
No, I was
yeah.
just thinking, I don't know if you'd be willing to take that on as, kind of get it in draft Wenham form. And then it would be something that we could vote on February 1st. You and another person, so it wouldn't all be on you, but we could have a 2 to 3 person subgroup, and whoever would like to work on that could raise their hand right now.
I think I'm going to back off on being the writer of this, only because I'm doing some work for another community on well, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, but anyway, I've got a deadline on that, and
Okay.
which would require. However, I will be happy to work with someone else if someone else will take on the responsibility of actually writing it.
Martha, you're talking specifically about this 6-page document that we've got before us?
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
I can, I could take on trying to rebrand that for Wenham.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Sam,
thinking.
you'd be the perfect person to do it, Sam, because that's your wheelhouse anyway.
I'm also assuming there's going to be a lot of like find and replace involved in
Exactly, yeah. I
formatting
think
that.
so.
So I'll take that on.
And if you want, Sam, if it would help, if you do it and then you want somebody just to look it over before you finalize it, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be terrific. A second pair of eyes would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pat.
And
Yeah.
Tova, did you also want to be involved in that?
Well, I had a question. I don't know if this would go with it, but are we also looking to maybe have a form made up for like submission? Because I would be willing to work on that if that's something we want.
I think that that's part of it, and we did. So could we entertain a motion to make a little subcommittee of Pat and Sam and Tova to work on the process documentation and rebranding of stuff, using Lexington and other things that you found. I looked at everybody's intake form, and they're almost all the same. They're usually less detailed than the Lexington one. Usually they just have name, address, and what happened. I liked the Lexington one because it sort of made them put it in a bucket.
Yeah, I agree.
But
the other thing, before you make a motion, Martha, I would be happy to begin a list of supporting agencies that we could use as a reference whenever we put something up, or however, and maybe get some phone numbers and things of where people can call that would support, Hawk or whatever. If that would be a help, and then, people could add to it, or.
I also think we can ad hoc some of that stuff, as it comes up. I think I also have good access to Hawk through, my previous work at Atrius.
Although having that list, if I create a team and it's Jeremy and Janet, and
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Access, then they would be able to pull this list out and say, okay, based on what you told us, and then that's how we would. No, so I think we'd have that list and we'd put it on our website.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because that adds to this broader policy that I think would be important, so that people could look at our website or whatever and say, okay, this is what they can do. I guess I'm not going to bother to go there, or, oh boy, they're going to be able to, help me out with whatever my issue is.
Right. Or even, I don't even need to contact them because I see
exactly
on this link and I can
exactly
these people who are the specific people that can help me. So all three of those things could happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so I'm going to ask again, because I know we have a hard stop. Some people have a 7:00 meeting. So I would entertain a motion to create a Human Rights Committee subgroup focused on documenting our process for intaking complaints and issues.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? And I believe we have to do a verbal roll call.
Yes,
right?
correct.
Okay, so I'm going to say, and Emma, I'm going to skip you because you're a non-voting member, but I'll say Jeremy,
Aye.
Kevin,
I'm actually not sure if I'm allowed to vote because of my status. If that's Tom, I don't know if you can speak to that.
You can, I am an ex officio, so I
I
can't
am
vote.
too, I believe.
I don't know. I think you're
You're
appointed. Yeah, I
an
think you're the
appointed
least-
member. You're just a member, you're a member too because of your position.
Right.
Okay,
So you can vote.
all right, aye.
Okay, Pat,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Tova,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
and I'm also voting aye. So I,
Tom, can I ask, do ex officio members vote?
Generally not, to my knowledge. I thought.
On my list here, and I mean, I'm perfectly happy to have Kevin vote, but it does say that ex officio, he's appointed as an ex officio
Oh, he
member.
is. I thought he was appointed as, because, well,
Uh,
because he was listed.
Let's see, Tom Yunker will serve as an ex officio member to the committee. Let's see. Oh, no.
No, because it's police.
I'm corrected, he's been
appointed.
appointed. So
No,
he's all set.
I checked with Nikki before I did the first set of minutes and she told me, because I wasn't sure. And she
Yeah.
told me Kevin was appointed.
yeah, an appointed
All right.
actual member, right.
All right, great.
Okay, that's great. And I appreciate you guys doing that. And I will forward the documents that I have downloaded to the whole committee, and you guys can use that as a start, but also feel free to look at other towns' websites. I know I felt like of the 10 or so I looked at, Lexington definitely had the most robust.
And Martha, can you give us a due date?
Yeah,
Would you be able to have it done for February 1st meeting?
Yeah. I think that's a reasonable, and we can report out in the meeting on it.
Right, and I don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. It doesn't have to be.
Feels like that's been my mantra for the last 10 months.
I know, that's the pandemic mantra, but honestly, do not recreate the wheel, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to document what we want people to know, and we can, make it look pretty on the website, hopefully. I mean, I can.
Martha, could you just go over one more time and read actually what we just voted on?
Oh, Janet's gonna have to read that. Did you get all down, Janet?
Okay,
Oh, I may have not done it word for word. There was a unanimous vote to create a subcommittee to, let me see whatever I wrote it, to do an intake form and to go through the Lexington forms and put it into Wenham's language. And the three people are Kevin, Pat, and Tova.
okay, Tova, you're gonna do the intake form.
Sam, Tova, and Pat.
Sam, yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I said that wrong. I wrote Sam.
That's okay.
I didn't
Right,
look
so
at my
it-
paper when I said it.
To document an intake process for citizen and non-citizen complaints.
Okay,
Specifically said, you don't have to be a citizen of Wenham to access our services, because you could be somebody in town, who works here,
Right.
who's experienced some form of discrimination in our town.
All right, I got those words exactly,
Okay, and you can always listen to the recording anyway.
which is
We
what I did
can.
last time.
Just to clarify, we are allowed to now, the three of us communicate via email, and are we allowed to meet in a Zoom if we wanted
Yep.
to? Okay,
You
all
guys
right.
are, yes, I clarified that with Tom. That's why I was desperate to get some subcommittees set up, because this is sort of a stilted way to
Right.
do work, and we have a lot of work to do.
There's a
Perfect.
but though, is
Oh.
your subcommittee really shouldn't be communicating with the other members of the committee. That should only be
Sure.
communicated at a formal meeting.
Okay.
Right, so we'll have a report out to the committee at large in our February 1st meeting. That's the deadline for us finishing our work, and that's when we communicate on it. That makes good sense.
Okay, so Tom, does that mean that they have to have the report in the packet, the meeting packet 48 hours in advance?
It generally is preferred that you
But
have
not
all your.
required?
Understood. That's all right. It's 2 days earlier.
I say that, Sam, because February 1st is a Monday, so 2 days earlier is actually the Thursday before. So that kind of He's not saying it's must have, so
It's preferred that the
preferred.
information.
Yeah,
is-
well, we'll definitely put it on the agenda.
Okay.
So that's a week from today, the 28th.
Nope, the February 1st. It's 2 weeks.
Well,
Oh, Janet, I think Janet's speaking to the due date.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about the due date.
Yeah.
Tech-
February
Well,
1st
I'm
is a
in
Monday.
quarantine right now, so I'll have plenty of time to help out.
There we go.
Oh, Topa, no.
Oh, so, did you
Yeah.
get exposed? Oh.
My brother is sick, so we're all at home right now.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
sorry.
Ah.
But I can help, so
That's
I
great.
can't go to work.
Okay, that sounds good.
Martha, can I ask a
yeah.
question? If I
Yes.
or when, I should say, when I am able to contact someone from the, from Lexington who's on their board, you want me just to report back at our February meeting and let you know that it could be put on the agenda? I mean, I don't know if they'll get right back to me or not, but how do you
You mean
want
if-
that?
Are you asking them to come to our meeting?
No, just, do you want me just to give a report about what their experience has
Yeah.
been?
I think that would
Okay.
be good. We'll put that as an
Okay.
agenda item. And I think, Tom, I personally, and you guys can vote me down, I would love it if the town council could come to our next meeting just to make sure that we understand our legal obligations in terms of this information, especially around confidentiality, so that we don't do any.
I am
Do
pleased
they
that-
have to meet with us? Or could they
I-
be emailed?
Well, what I generally like, just my own experience in working with a committee like yours, one question creates another question and another question. And to literally put them on, particularly now with Zoom, putting them on for a half hour with you.
Maybe even shorter, but
Yeah,
I know.
I think you guys will be
email-
super impressed with them. They're phenomenal. We had them do a department-wide training a couple of years ago, and they do an excellent job. You guys it's gonna certainly facilitate a lot of back and forth, and you're gonna have questions you wouldn't have even thought of. I agree. It's well.
Yeah, and
worth it.
I find that email doesn't work well because they might answer the specific question specifically, but like you said, there could be a lot of context that's lost in an email. So I think that would be great.
I can work on that. I've got a number of things tomorrow, but I'll work on that tomorrow. That's your.
All right, and if they can't come to the February 1st meeting, maybe it has to wait, but I feel like the confidentiality issue really needs to be
Mhm.
buttoned down so that we know if we start getting input.
It's better for them to come to like a February meeting
Yeah,
versus going into the spring where they have a number of town meetings they have to deal with.
okay, that's great.
All
Okay,
right,
there-
I have, the note taker
questions?
has 60 seconds till her next meeting.
right, I know. I think
Martha, if
Emma
you would
has to
just
leave
send
it.
me the document, I
Yeah.
will, I'll start to wordsmith.
I'll send it out to everybody and then the subcommittee will have it. And all right, so then I will officially adjourn at 7 for the people who need to go. And we will see you guys February 1st. Thank you all for making this extra meeting possible. I
Thanks,
think
everyone.
Progress.
It was good. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right,
you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.